Make America Great Again is simply reestablishing apartheid in America. I'm Jerry Maynard, and this is Soul Success. I'm so glad you joined us. Why are we going to talk about Make America Great Again? Because the Bible says that if you do not know the truth, you will not be free. The truth shall make you free. We need to know the truth of what is happening in America today with our politics in Washington, D.C. and throughout all the states that are mocking and or trying to duplicate what's happening in D.C. Let's make it clear. In the election that took place in 2024, we had some people who did not want Vice President Harris to be the president because she's a woman, she's a person of color. But some people did not want her to be president because they felt like the country has gone too far left regarding transgender issues and other issues like that. We also had some who voted for President Trump because they feel like they can make more money. They'll get a big tax cut. The corporations will be favored over labor. The corporations will be favored over people. And so therefore they want limited government so that they don't have to pay high taxes. Then we had those who voted because of religion. They believe that the Democrats do not have the same values as they do. And so therefore they voted for that. However, there is a group of about 35% of Americans who desire for America to be dominated by white males for the benefit of white males. There are 35% of this country that desire to go back to the day where women and minorities had no rights. That's called apartheid. Apartheid is when a minority group uses racism and other things in order to oppress, suppress, take away the rights of the majority in order for them to rule and dominate for the benefit of the minority class. We know this from South Africa. We know it in Israel. In South Africa, apartheid was used by white Afrikaners to oppress, suppress, deny rights to the Africans, to the South Africans, people, black folks, people of color. So they had no rights, no property rights, no voting rights, none, so that the white minority could control the black majority. What is happening in America is the same. Let me give you a lesson. For those of you who don't know, I used to be an elected official, a Metro Council at large, elected countywide. In 2006, 2007, I was running for election, campaigning. There was a debate where we had a town hall meeting to discuss a program called 287G. That's right, 287G. Pastor Jerry, what is that? I'm glad you asked. 287G is the following. The federal government has exclusive control and authority over immigration. The federal government has exclusive control and authority over undocumented immigrants and people who come to this country. The federal government controls who comes into the country, who does not, who can stay and who cannot. However, the federal government back in 2005, 2006 came up with a contract that said if you are a local sheriff department, if you're a local police department, the federal government will contract with your sheriff's department so that you can arrest, detain, interrogate, and initiate the deportation of undocumented immigrants. That's right. So back in 2007, Nashville signed a contract with the federal government called 287G that will allow the sheriff's department to arrest, detain, interrogate, and initiate the deportation of undocumented immigrants. At that debate, we were supposed to be talking about whether the local authority, the sheriff's department, should be in the business of doing that. That was the debate. Let the feds take care of it. We don't want to use limited resources and those things of going around and arresting undocumented immigrants. As a city, we said we don't want to do that. However, during that town hall meeting, the quiet part came out. A group of white folks stood up and said, the real issue is by 2034, white people will be the minority in the country. They also brought up at that town hall meeting that Europe was no longer dominated by whites, that Europe now was dominated by Muslims, Africans, and those from the Caribbean. And at that town hall meeting, it was said more than once, we don't want to become like Europe. That was code word that we do not want to become a minority white country. And that the 287G was a tool by which that they could remove immigrants from the country before they had babies who are now automatically United States citizens. At that debate, it was brought up that that the country needed to remove undocumented immigrants from the country before they could have babies that will allow the babies to become United States citizens. At that same debate, they brought up that white couples were averaging one baby a couple, or 1.5, whereas immigrants were averaging like 3 to 4 children, and black folks, mothers, were averaging 2 to 3 children. In other words, we, white folks, will be outnumbered in 30 years. That was the debate. That's what was brought up. At the time, because I was like, well, 30 years is a long time, I really didn't know how to take that. I was like, oh, that can't be true. They really can't be. That's got to be a real small minority. And in fact, when we were on the campaign trail, many people said, oh, that's just a fraction. That's just a margin of people. They're not serious. That's just a few racist people. Doesn't matter. Go to 2024. Go to 2016. What does President Trump run on? Illegal immigration. He then talks about the Mexicans and Latinas being rapists. He then talks about MS-13 trying to scare the bejesus out of white folks, that they're gang members and we've got to deport them without due process. All of these things are being done in order for us to reestablish apartheid. You say, Brother Maynard, how can you speak like this? Look at their actions, not their words. If you look at their actions, what is happening? Congress is passing an act called the SAVE Act, which will states this, that if your name that you register to vote for does not match the name on your birth certificate, you cannot register to vote. Do you know what that means for 70 million women? 70 million women in the United States, their last name was changed so that they could take on the name of their husband, which means that their name currently is not the name on their birth certificate. Congress refused to amend that legislation to make an exception for married women. That means that 70 million women will be denied the right to vote because their last name does not match the name on their birth certificate. Look at DEI. With DEI and the removal of history and books and artifacts and everything that deals with the experience of African Americans and other people of color, it is to wipe away, whitewash what has happened in our country. If you look at what happened with the plane crash in DC, before they could begin the investigation, 2 planes crashing in the DC area, Donald Trump went on news and said the crash was caused by DEI hires. That is code word. DEI now is a code word. It's a new word for ninja. You know what I'm talking about. And so therefore, what they are doing is they're trying to reestablish, when they say make America great again, they're trying to go back to a apartheid system that we had back at the founding of our country. For those of you who are not constitutional scholars, let me give you a brief assessment, and then I won't lecture any longer. But I'm telling you, without the truth, you'll never be free. The founders of our country understood that in states like South Carolina and Mississippi and Alabama, slaves outnumbered white folks. So if you have an election and up north it's 99% white and they've got way more white folks than you got in South Carolina, Alabama, and Mississippi, you can see that white people from the north will be the majority in Congress and in the Senate. And if they're the majority in Congress and the Senate, they can end slavery. So the states in South Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, all throughout the South insisted that the founders say that black people or the slaves were 3/4 of a person. Why? 3/5 then of a citizen allowed then the southern states to count them. 3/5 added up in order to bring their numbers up for them to have congressional seats in the House, United States House. That was done purposely. So they didn't think we were people until it was convenient for them to keep power. The entire system of how we vote, it is not democracy where one person, one vote, but rather it is a system to protect whites and keep them in power. The redrawing of our congressional districts is to make sure that white males stay in power. We've had 2 opportunities to elect a woman as president, and yet what happened? They both came up short. You know why? Because there's a concerted effort to make America great again, which is to go back to the time of our founding fathers, where women and minorities' rights were subjugated to the rights of white males. It is happening across our country. Open your eyes. They're trying to create an apartheid system where they stay in control because the numbers are clear. Minorities, people of color, Latinas will be a majority in less than 4 years in America, and whites will be the minority. If they could control white women vote and women, period, then white males again will be able to be dominant in America for white Americans. This is not all white folks. This is a 30 to 35% of this country is willing to have an authoritarian in the White House, and some of the Supreme Court justices, including one that looks like us, but ain't one of us, is trying to ensure that this country goes back to apartheid, the time when African Americans and women could not vote. Check it out. It wasn't until 1965 that we had the Voting Rights Act for African Americans. Women got the right to vote just a few years before that. It hasn't been a long time since women and minorities did not have the right to vote. We didn't have the right to own property. Women couldn't work in the work field. Women were teachers and secretaries, and that was it. Finally, I'll leave you with this. I know it's controversial as a pastor, but I have to bring it up. The reason why they, the Supreme Court, and corporations and religious organizations hid behind Roe v. Wade, it was not so much about choice. It was about controlling women's bodies. By controlling a woman's body, you control her mobility. If a woman can decide either through contraception and or birth control or the right to an abortion, she can control her upward mobility. She can control where she goes. She can control and plan her own family. She can determine when she wants to have children. She can determine to get her degrees first and then have children. She can determine if she wants to live in California or Washington, D.C. or Alaska or down to Florida. See, when a woman controls her own body, she can then determine her own upward mobility. But when you do not have that control, and then you have to be dependent on someone else, you then, because of your lack of ability to have upward mobility and your lack of ability to go to school or your lack of mobility to do the things you want, it takes you out of the workforce. It takes you out of the opportunity to become the CEO. It really hinders your ability for upward mobility. It's not about choice for me. I'm not a woman. It is about opportunity for everyone. And so that is what's happening in America. You got to know the truth. That Make America Great Again is about taking America back to apartheid, to a time where white males dominated the country for the benefit of white males. We need to wake up, see the light. We got to stop twerking and tweaking, and we got to get busy. Serious saints, we got to stop all this shenanigans that we're doing over sexualization and focus on what's happening in America. Because pretty soon you'll find out you won't have the right to vote. You won't have the right of mobility. You'll see that opportunities and contracts will be denied. Healthcare will be gone. Education will be gone. Scholarships and grants, all of those things will be wiped out because only the few will have the opportunity like they used to have, where education, before there was public education, only the rich could go to school. Before there was health care reform, only the rich had access to health care. See the light? Open our eyes. I'm Jerry Maynard. I will never go back. We have the power of the Holy Spirit to fight with God's principles to make sure we never go back. Thank you for joining Soul Success. We come on every Thursday at 7 o'clock. Please join us on our YouTube page or our Facebook page. If you're looking for a church, Cathedral of Praise is a great place because God is great. We're located at 4300 Clarksville Pike here in Nashville, Tennessee. Join us in person at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time or on our Facebook page or our YouTube page, Cathedral of Praise. You be blessed and continue to pray for me as I pray for you.